Inside a bunker, a bloody Chloe, Oleg, and another man run for their lives while an AI voice announces that lockdown will begin in 60 seconds. Suddenly, Oleg stops and shoots the other man down before attempting to shoot Chloe as well, but he only hits her leg. Oleg then leaves the bunker and the door closes before Chloe can follow. Hearing a growl nearby, Chloe begins making her way back through the tunnel and manages to slide under the shutter just in time. However, the other man gets stuck and grabs Chloe's legs, begging her not to leave him. At that moment, a monster appears on the other side and drags the man away, allowing the shutter to fully close. Afterward, Chloe finds a computer and sends out a distress message. She explains that the facility is under attack, that it's been put into lockdown for 24 hours, and that she's the only survivor. If anyone wants Adam and the research, they must rescue her. Chloe then cleans her wound and removes the bullet. She also washes up and gets some new clothes from the lockers. Hearing the growling again, she decides to hide behind some furniture. The monster comes closer and reaches out, but when it sees her face, it doesn't attack. Meanwhile, mercenary James gets a video call from his pregnant wife, who becomes annoyed when she sees him in gear since he was supposed to come home. James explains that he's accepted a special ops mission and promises this will be the last one for a while since it pays well enough for a good house. Afterward, James and his best friend Marshall board a plane with Marshall's ex and fellow mercenary Rachel. During the trip, Rachel explains the details. They must enter a bioresearch lab in Bosvania to rescue Chloe without being detected. Oleg's team has already tried to enter the bunker, resulting in 12 civilian casualties. Those soldiers are now in the area trying to find another entrance. The mercenaries also have teams on the ground who have already found 2 escape tunnels. Rachel will join Team Alpha to enter the facility, while James and Marshall will join Bravo to provide cover. A helicopter will later pick them up. Once they arrive in the forest, James and Marshall spot one of Oleg's men searching for a hatch with a metal detector. When the man sees them, he immediately runs away, leading to a chase. The man tries hiding behind a tree, but the rest of Team Bravo quickly finds him. While the team wants to kill him, James decides to tie him to a tree instead. The prisoner keeps repeating the Nephilim are coming, but James dismisses it as nonsense. Bravo leaves, leaving the man tied to the tree. Meanwhile, Team Alpha uses a small explosive to create a hole and enter the bunker. Inside, they encounter a man injured and leaning against the wall. When he turns around, his face is in the process of mutating. Suddenly, the man charges at them. The team opens fire, but it isn't enough to stop him, and he sends a mercenary flying. In the forest, Team Bravo discovers their prisoner has escaped. A bomb then explodes near them, forcing them to take cover as Oleg's men open fire. One team member is immediately killed and another is severely wounded. Bombs continue exploding and Marshall is knocked down but quickly recovers and continues fighting. He gets stuck behind a tree. James is also knocked down by a bomb. He drags himself to recover his weapon, then runs among the trees to kill the remaining enemies and save Marshall. He also encounters the escaped prisoner and this time doesn't hesitate to shoot him in the head. Afterward, James and Marshall help their wounded teammate but hear more enemies approaching. They hide their injured teammate after bandaging his wounds. From their cover, they see Oleg's men finding another teammate who wasn't actually dead, but he is repeatedly shot by the enemy. Oleg's group then brings a dog to search for them. Marshall has no choice but to shoot the handler, triggering another gunfight. The duo kills as many enemies as possible while running through the forest. Soon they run out of bullets and more explosives go off nearby. Their only choice is to jump off a cliff into the water. The strong current pushes them for a while. James manages to hold onto a rock and notices a waterfall, worrying about Marshall, who appears swimming nearby. They get back on land and sneak around to reach the meeting place, but they don't see Team Alpha. An argument ensues because Marshall wants to wait for pickup as planned, but James believes Oleg's team will find them soon. At that moment, barking is heard in the distance, so Marshall agrees to hide in a cave. The duo crawls through narrow tunnels until they reach an open area where they're thrilled to find a hatch hidden under some rocks. They immediately move the rocks aside and enter the bunker. At the same time, Oleg and Jonah find the injured mercenary and beat him as they demand to know the location of the bunker entrance. Suddenly, a body bag near them starts moving. Oleg shoots it down before forcing the mercenary to open it. Inside is a monster which Oleg lights on fire while explaining that this is why no one can be allowed into the lab. In the bunker, James and Marshall wander around finding blood everywhere but no bodies. They collect a few scattered guns and bullets before continuing their search. In another room, they come across photographs showing Chloe and a monster in the snow. James takes pictures with his phone and plays a recording from a scientist explaining how they retrieved the body of subject N from a glacier. The scientist notes that using the monster's blood on humans acted like a parasite, attacking their DNA. Some of the researchers believe the monster was something biblical that should never have been awakened. Marshall is confused, so James explains about the fallen angels who abused human women, resulting in the birth of very strong monsters known as Nephilim. These creatures waged war against humanity, nearly causing extinction until Noah built the ark to save humanity, and the flood supposedly eradicated the Nephilim. At that moment, growling is heard and James goes to investigate. Feeling a presence behind him, he follows it down a hall and enters another room. Hearing strange noises from a vent, James spots Chloe hiding behind some furniture. Chloe warns James that the monsters are attracted to sound, but it's too late. A monster appears above them, throwing James to the ground and causing him to drop his gun. The monster lands on top of James, growling and repeating his words. Before it can attack, Chloe strikes it with an axe. The monster turns toward her, but Marshall arrives and opens fire. The bullets don't injure the creature and it escapes through the vent. Growling echoes through the vents and Chloe tells the duo they must leave before it returns. The trio rushes to the entrance, but freezes when they see Oleg's group has arrived. They attempt to retreat through another corridor only to find the monster blocking their way. As it approaches, Chloe spots another vent. The group jumps inside and crawls as quickly as possible. Chloe watches the monster below them and the group halts to stay silent. However, Marshall accidentally triggers the recorder. He quickly shuts it off, but the monster has already heard them. It reaches into the vent and grabs James' foot. Chloe and Marshall crawl ahead while James shoots the monster to force it to release him. James eventually joins them in a room where Chloe is vomiting. The men demand answers and Chloe explains that the scientists used Subject N's blood to create a genetic hybrid named Adam, part human and part monster. James suggests leading through another entrance, but Chloe warns that's where Adam's rampage began. Over 20 employees were infected, becoming the monsters they're now facing. James recalls a third tunnel on the map and suggests finding it to escape. After Chloe vomits again, the trio leaves the room and sneaks through the bunker. They find another vent, and while James works on opening it, Chloe continues her story. Adam was the first successful hybrid created 30 years ago from an embryo. He was brought to the lab for containment but became unstable due to the experimentation, ultimately snapping. James finally opens the vent, but before they can leave, they're discovered by one of Oleg's men. The group urges him to be quiet, but he ignores them, attracting a monster that kills him instantly. The trio uses the distraction to escape into the vent. Crawling away, Chloe reveals that Oleg was originally the lab's guard and was the one who killed Adam. Now Oleg wants to weaponize Adam's research, which is currently in Chloe's possession. The group eventually exits the vent and follows pipes into an engine room. They cross a narrow door and search for the next hatch. James' watch beeps, signaling the end of the lockdown. They quickly pass through another door, lock it behind them, and follow a corridor. There they find Rachel, severely wounded. Checking the security cameras, Chloe notices the enemy is closing in. Marshall tries to bring Rachel with them, but Chloe points out she's infected and there's no cure. When Marshall refuses to leave her behind, Chloe tells him where to find the medical ward to get a stretcher. While Marshall heads to the medical ward and James searches for the next hatch, Chloe seizes the moment and shoots Rachel in the head. The guys return after hearing the gunshot and Marshall becomes furious. He ignores Chloe's explanation that she spared Rachel from suffering as a monster, shouting at her and even threatening to kill her. James intervenes to stop him, but their argument attracts the attention of a nearby monster. The creature soon appears at the door, forcing Marshall and James to start shooting at it. However, their bullets have no effect and they run out of ammunition. The group flees, but in the chaos, they accidentally split up. James and Chloe find themselves in the medical ward where a body suddenly starts moving and roars. Chloe smothers its face with a pillow while James hands her his knife to finish it off. She repeatedly stabs the body until it stops moving. Meanwhile, Marshall stumbles into the morgue and decides to hide in a freezer next to a corpse. At that moment, James contacts him and Marshall overhears the sound of a monster trying to break into the medical bay. As James and Chloe struggle to hold the door closed, Marshall attempts to leave the freezer to help them but discovers the door cannot be opened from the inside. Suddenly, the corpse beside him reanimates and bites him on the arm. Marshall grabs his knife and repeatedly stabs it in the head until it stops moving. Before Marshall can catch his breath, Jonah appears, pulling him out of the freezer and striking him with a weapon. Simultaneously, James and Chloe manage to lock the door, forcing the monster to leave. However, they hear Oleg's men approaching. James throws the recorder into the corridor, luring two of Oleg's men away. He uses the distraction to attack, taking one down immediately. The other man, much larger, overpowers James, but Chloe intervenes. Displaying remarkable skill, she uses a knife to target key spots, ultimately killing the larger man. Afterward, James insists on finding Marshall, but Chloe stops him, warning that if Oleg obtains the research, he will weaponize it and kill everyone. James reluctantly agrees to escort Chloe out first. In the morgue, Marshall is restrained on a table as Jonah taunts him, describing how the infection will kill him and transform him into a Nephilim. Jonah demands to know where Adam is, but Marshall insists he doesn't know. Suddenly, Marshall experiences a vision of Adam killing the scientists, chasing Oleg out and recording the distress message. He realizes Chloe is Adam and Oleg has been trying to stop her. Meanwhile, James and Chloe reach Adam's room where they find the body of the Alpha Team leader. Chloe becomes nauseated at the sight. James tries to contact Marshall, who is on the verge of being stabbed by Jonah. Before Jonah can deliver the fatal blow, a monster bursts into the morgue. Jonah turns to shoot it, but the creature grabs him, violently thrashes him around, and ultimately throws him onto Marshall, killing him. The monster then inspects Marshall, but spares him upon noticing he is infected before leaving the morgue. Marshall frees himself using his knife. Back in Adam's room, James gives Chloe the deceased team leader's phone, instructing her to use it to call the helicopter once she escapes through the Alpha Team's tunnel. As James prepares to leave to help Marshall, he notices a crib in the corner. Realizing Chloe's frequent vomiting is due to pregnancy, he demands the truth. Chloe admits she is Adam, explaining that after being imprisoned for 30 years, she snapped. Desperate to protect her unborn child from a life of captivity, she killed her captors to secure her freedom. James empathizes with her desire to save her child, but argues that her blood is too dangerous to let her leave. Suddenly, a monster enters the room and Chloe watches as it easily overpowers James. At that moment, Marshall arrives and threatens to shoot Chloe. The monster drops James and Chloe flees, turning off the lights. In the darkness, Marshall opens fire but is swiftly knocked down by the creature. James finds a flamethrower left behind by the soldiers and uses it to incinerate the monster, killing it. Meanwhile, Chloe makes it outside and finds Oleg waiting for her, his gun drawn. Chloe, desperate and remorseful, apologizes for her actions and moves closer to hug him. Oleg, however, does not forgive her. In a frantic attempt to survive, Chloe steals his knife and stabs him, but Oleg swiftly grabs it back and stabs her in return. Both collapse to the ground injured. Moments later, James and Marshall emerge from the bunker. They rush to check on Chloe only for her to suddenly attack. With monstrous strength, she stabs James before turning on Marshall. Her enhanced abilities allow her to overpower him easily, and when James attempts to rejoin the fight, she dispatches him with equal ease. Despite their injuries, both men refuse to give up and repeatedly attempt to take her down. Chloe, however, is relentless, knocking them down one after another. As the fight rages on, Chloe reaches for a fallen gun. Seizing the opportunity, James sneaks up behind her and wraps a rope around her neck. She struggles violently, managing to gouge James's eye with her fingers to free herself before punching him to the ground. Chloe then tries to stab James, but he catches the knife with his bare hand, enduring the pain to stop her. At this moment, Marshall, now partially transformed from his infection, uses his newfound strength to grab the rope and pull Chloe away. In a final desperate move, Marshall jumps into the hatch, dragging Chloe along with him. The rope tightens as they fall, and the choking finally kills her. James, despite his injuries, climbs down the hatch to save Marshall. However, Marshall, fully aware of his transformation, insists James leave without him. After an emotional goodbye, James ascends the hatch and collapses on the ground outside. He uses the phone to call for help, but passes out before hearing his wife's voice. Later that night, a rescue team arrives in the forest and finds James. Unbeknownst to them, he has already transformed. As they approach, James suddenly attacks, leaving their fates unknown.